Okay, hi everybody. My name is Jennifer Cuevera. I am very honored to have been invited to give this lecture. I am a postdoc in Jonathan's lab, and since my PhD years, I have been doing research on the ecology and evolution of social behavior in spiders. So as you can imagine, I am very thrilled to be here today and talk about spider sociality. I based today's lecture on the chapter on the spider sociality from this book, which is the book that I believe you're using for this class. This book, the chapter summarizes nicely all the existing literature about the evolution of social behavior in the spiders, explains the range of social diversity within the spiders, and also lays out all the conditions that has facilitated the evolution of social behavior. So if you have any questions after the lecture, feel free to go back to the chapter. Everything is from there, or you can send me an email. My email is right here. I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if you have any comments, I'll be happy to hear those too. You can also ask Jonathan. Jonathan is also the expert in social spiders, so you're in good hands. Okay, let's start, and I'm gonna minimize this video here because it's distracting me. Okay, great. So I know that many of you probably didn't know that spiders have evolved a range of social behaviors. Not that many people know, actually. So I want to start today's lecture by first telling you about the different forms of social behavior in spiders. So it's like a review of the different categories that we have. Then I want to answer the question, why spiders form social groups? And I want to do this by taking into account the importance of ecology, the importance of environmental conditions that have played key roles in the evolution of spider sociality. And then I want to wrap up this lecture by having a little discussion about how social spiders compare to other social animals that you may have already seen in this course, but actually rather how do they differ from the other social animals that you have already learned. So let's start by saying that sociality is actually considered a unique behavior in spiders. As you may already know, and as most people know, spiders are well known for their predatory and for their solitary behavior. They're actually quite antisocial. However, out of approximately 46,000 described species, a few dozen species that belong to different genera and families have evolved some form of social behavior. So sociality in this species can range from simple aggregation of webs that occur for a short period of time, like the one that you see here on the top, which is pretty big, actually, a big aggregation of web, to large colonies where the spiders share a communal nest that grows over generations, and where the spiders cooperate in different activities such as prey capture, feeding, and brood care. So, and next, so this is one example of those social species that are permanently living in the same communal nest. This is Anelosimos eximius, one of the most social species that we know and that inhabits the tropical rainforest of South America. So let's check out the different forms of sociality. Okay, so as may you have seen so far in this course, there are different forms of sociality in the animal kingdom. And these are not necessarily discrete categories, but rather a continuum of social behaviors that overlap with each other. And that happens to be the case with social spiders as well. And so we have placed these social behaviors into different broad categories. And these categories are based on two criteria. And this has actually facilitated the way we study them. So one of the criteria is whether individuals share a common web or whether they maintain their own territory when they form groups. Here on the picture above here, we see an aggregation of webs. And even though they're forming a colony, you can see that there are individual webs with one spider in each one. So they're obviously maintaining their own territory, even though they're aggregating together. In this example here below, you can see that the spiders seem to be sharing the same space. So they're not maintaining their own territory, they're sharing the same space. So this is one criteria. The second criteria is whether individuals form these groups or aggregations during their entire life cycle or only for a short period of time. So I'm going to talk more about this later on. But whether individuals maintain their own territory or not depends a lot on the type of the web that the spider builds. For example, species that build orbicular webs, which is this one, these are very common everywhere. You may have seen in your gardens, in nature. So these orb webs would be required to maintain separate territories. These species, even though they aggregate because these are individual webs, they would be required to maintain their own territories because orb webs are designed to be built and to be used by a single individual, by a single spider. So these aggregations of spiders that build orbicular webs, most likely the spiders are maintaining their own territories. So in the case of spiders that build irregular webs, these can be built and enlarged and occupied simultaneously by multiple individuals. And this type of web actually facilitates communal living, as we will see later on. However, even in the species that build these irregular webs, they sometimes may maintain individual territory if the environmental conditions are not appropriate and they don't allow group formation. So the type of web, it's important when spiders either maintain their own territory or they share the common space within these groups or aggregations. On the other hand, whether spiders' colonies are permanent or whether these groups are just temporary may often depend on the environmental conditions in their habitats. But before we talk about these environmental conditions, I want to review the categories of spider sociality that we have formulated according to these two criteria. Okay, so we have three broad categories. And of course, as I said before, they're not necessarily discrete. Sometimes we have categories that overlap with each other. But for the most part, we've done our best, and we have three broad categories. First, we have the social spiders, which are the spiders that build irregular webs, so they share a common space with non-individual territories. And these groups are permanent, so they last for their entire life cycle. And so from now on, for this lecture, I'm gonna call these spiders social spiders. The second category are the subsocial spiders. They also build irregular webs, so they don't occupy their own territories, they're not territorial. The only difference is that they only last for a short period of time before they disperse. And then we have a third category known as the colonial spiders. In the colonial spiders, individuals aggregate their own individual webs. They tend to build orb webs usually, so they maintain their own territories. And these colonies usually can be either permanent or they can be only for a short period of time. And in the literature, usually we call them simply social spiders, subsocial spiders, and colonial spiders. So this is what I'm gonna call them right now for the remainder of the lecture. And I'm gonna review each one of these categories right now. So social spiders, the non-territorial permanent social species, are now represented by 19 species. which belong to 8 different genera and 5 families. All of these species build irregular webs, tri-dimensional nests like the ones that you see here. This is Anelosimos eximius from South America, and this is Stegodiphyus dumicola from Africa. So I'm going to be referring to both of these species very often because these 2 genera are the best studied out of the social spiders. So we know the most about these 2 social genera. So I'm going to be using examples from both of these genera. As you can see, both of them build this tri-dimensional nest, and most of the social species build this type of webs, except for one species that we know of that only build 2-dimensional meshes. These 3-dimensional communal nests are usually equipped with a prey capture webbing that extends outwards, that you can see. This webbing is used to intercept the flying prey, flying insects. Once the insect is intercepted by the web, then the spiders, as you can see here, attack the prey and inject the venom, and together they kill it. So that's how it usually happens. All the activities of the colonies take place within these communal webs. And this includes cooperation during web building and maintaining the web, cooperation during prey capture, also feeding and alloparental care, meaning that females take care of each other's offspring. So this tri-dimensional nest tend to contain multiple females and their broods, and they can last for generations and generations. Rather than dispersing, as it is usual in most spiders, the offspring of the spiders usually stay in the maternal nest their entire lives, where they grow and reproduce. And so, as I said, colonies are going to grow over multiple generations to contain from dozens to thousands or even 10,000s of spiders. In my experience, actually, when I've worked with Anelosimos eximius here in the tropical rainforest in Ecuador, the largest size that I've collected has been a nest containing up to 15,000 spiders. So that's pretty big. So however, when colonies grow to those large sizes, it's not beneficial anymore for the spiders because the intraspecific competition for food may be greater at large colony sizes. So at large colony sizes in social spiders, individuals may disperse away from the colony. And they can disperse either as solitary females or in groups, and they will establish their own colonies. So one interesting thing about these spider colonies in social spiders is that for the most part, there is very little or no gene flow among colonies lineages, which causes the spiders and their colonies to be highly inbred. So they have this very subdivided population structure, which is actually thought to have facilitated the evolution of highly biased female sex ratios. These spiders have sex ratios ranging from anywhere to 8 to 28% male. So it's very female biased. And we have seen this female bias sex ratio already at the embryo stage, which is very interesting. And the mechanisms for this are actually still unknown. Interestingly, spiders are diplodiploid with chromosomal sex determination. And therefore, males, being, the heterogamic sex, are expected to produce equal male and female sperm as a product of meiosis, which you may be familiar with by now. So it's really unclear still how this process happens in social spiders. Actually, it has been proposed in the literature that these biased sex ratios may have evolved through intercolony selection. So the colony grows and proliferates faster, but we don't know. Also interesting, unlike other social systems that you may have seen so far, like the eusocial insects, for instance, in the spiders, there aren't any reproductive division of labor within colonies. So there are no queens that reproduce. All of the females can potentially reproduce, although in some species, the proportion of females which reproduce in these colonies tends to decrease as colony sizes increases. But this is mostly likely due to the effect of increased competition for resources and some females not getting enough food, so they're not able to reproduce. So that's the reason why they wouldn't reproduce, but not because there is a reproductive division of labor here, as in the eusocial Hymenoptera, for instance. Also, the tendency of individuals to participate in communal activities within the colonies may vary with age. For example, I have seen in some social species that the younger offspring, they do not participate in prey capture, for instance, but they will help in other things. Also, it may vary according to condition, or also according to behavioral type. Species with that has colonies with individuals with different personalities, like more aggressive personalities or more docile personalities. The more aggressive ones may participate more often, perhaps in the capture of prey. So it may vary depending to their behavioral type as well. Let's move on to the subsocial spiders, non-territorial periodic social. So there are at least 70 species of subsocial spiders that belong to 16 families, and they represent at least 16 independent origins of subsocial behavior. These species also build irregular webs, typically tridimensional nests. But the difference with the social spider is that these nests only contain one female and her brood. So colonies during the social phase, when the female is with her offspring, the family cooperates in various activities. And for the most part, the offspring disperse away from the nest right before reaching reproductive maturity. So they only live in groups for some time before adulthood. And when it's time to reproduce, they leave the nest to form their own colonies. So the colonies don't grow very large in subsocial species. You can see this is a small colony of subsocial Anelosimos. It's very small. And there's also great variation in colony sizes between social and subsocial species, as social species grow much, much larger in their colonies than subsocial species do. So yeah, so colonies don't grow very large. And also some colonies of some species of subsocial spiders in Anelosimos, as well as in Stegodiphyus, they vary across their geographic range, having in some areas colonies that do contain multiple females and not just a single one in her brood as one would expect. And in some cases, actually, like places in Brazil that I have seen the subsocial Anelosimos jabaquara, the subsocial, this subsocial species is considered to be in transition between subsocial and social systems. So in subsocial species, sex ratios are not biased as they are in the permanent social spiders. However, there are exceptions. There are two Australian species that I can think of where the offspring mature and mate within the nest before dispersing, which doesn't happen in other subsocial species. And so in these two species, the sex ratios are female biased. But those are the only two exceptions that I can think of. So let's move on to the colonial spiders, which maintain their own territories. So for colonial spiders, the most common and best studied species tend to build orbicular webs that aggregate together in a web complex where individual webs are attached to one another with communally built frame lines. So here you cannot see very clearly, but here the spiders they do maintain the little orb webs, their own territories, and the lines that attach one web to another, that's built communally. Here we have another complex. Also, it's hard to tell, but you get the idea. So colonial spiders may form these groups either for a short period of time or permanently, depending on the species. In the species that aggregate only for some time, usually they are formed by single family units. So the mom and the offspring, which will disperse before it's time to mate and reproduce. This is an example of one of those species that form aggregations only for a short period of time, Parawixia bistriata. So in the species that are considered permanent colonial spiders, colonies or aggregations contain multiple females, and they may last several generations. Depending on the species, colonies sizes may range from just a few spiders to thousands. You can see this aggregation, which is an example of a permanent colony spider, Cytophora citricola. It's pretty big. You can have probably hundreds of spiders living here. So unlike the social spiders, in colonial spiders, group foraging is absent, as each web is used as individual territory. So there is a constraint in cooperation. They don't mix with one another. Allomaternal care is also absent in colonial species, but the colony complex sometimes does have common areas. You cannot see it here because this is not a very good picture, but the colony complex may have some common areas where the females guard their eggs, but they guard their own eggs. Usually in colonial spiders, new colonies are established by either single females or by the aggregation of individuals that have dispersed on their own, or in groups, as is the case of offspring dispersing from the natal nest. They may establish new aggregations. Males usually may move between from colony to colony at the time of the mating, when mating happens. So the mating system in colonial species is outbred, and there is no biased sex ratios that we know of. So it's important to know that there are other types of colonial spiders. As I said before, it's never black and white. We don't have discrete categories. So that happens in nature. So some other colonial spiders build actually irregular webs, and they are in close proximity from one another enough to be considered colonial. Also, other species that don't build webs, like some jumping spiders, for instance, have been found to nest in very close proximity from one another with little nests attached by interconnected, attached by silk. They're interconnected, with each other by silk, and they are considered also colonial. However, there is limited information about this species. So, like for colonial, for the purpose of this lecture, I'll just be referring to colonial spiders that build orbicular webs. Okay? All right, let's continue with social spiders. And I want to talk about the global distribution of social spiders because this is important. Social spiders have long been recognized as having a primarily tropical distribution. You can see here, these are all the social species that we know across the globe. They all concentrated in tropical places with Anelosimos here, which is the genus that I usually study. They're concentrated in tropical areas here. Stegodiphyus, the other genus that has been really well studied, they're usually in drier places in Africa. So they either occupy dry tropical places or wet tropical places. Subsocial species which are not represented in this map usually tend to extend into higher latitudes and elevations. So their distribution is a little more widespread. So the genus Anelosimos, which we have studied in Ecuador, is particularly interesting because besides having their social species at tropical latitude, within those tropical latitudes, such as in Ecuador, it appears that they also exhibit an elevational pattern of sociality, with the more social species being found at lower elevations, as you can see here. So social Anelosimos species in the neotropicals, therefore, are restricted to low to mid elevation areas within tropical habitats, whereas subsocial species are excluded from these habitats from the lower elevation tropical rainforests, but they occur at higher elevations where social species are not. So in the genus Anelosimos, this decline in level of sociality with elevation, it's also going together with a decline in colony size. So as you go up in elevation in Ecuador, it has been observed the decline in colony size within and among species. So this is very interesting. So our studies of the genus Anelosimos with respect to these patterns, geographical patterns, as well as other studies in the genus Stegodiphyus in Africa, has provided with a working hypothesis to explain this distribution. We argue that the distribution of social and subsocial spiders across the globe, across latitude and elevation, reflects most likely macroecological patterns in different ecological factors, such as the size of the insects, their prey, latitudinal or elevational patterns in environmental conditions, such as rain intensity, or the intensity of predation across elevation and latitude. So as I will go and explain in more detail in the next slides, these ecological factors across these gradients are key for explaining not only these geographical patterns in spider sociality, but also to explain why sociality evolved in some areas, such as tropical latitudes and low elevation areas, but not in others, not at higher elevations or higher latitudes. And this is essential for explaining why spiders form social groups. In the case of the colonial spiders, it's a little bit different. So this map shows the global distribution of orb weaving colonial spiders. So, but they appear to occur in a variety of habitats across the planet. Although most colonial species appear to be either tropical or subtropical, some extend into temperate regions and occupy habitats ranging from tropical rainforests to grasslands to deserts. Even single species may inhabit a variety of habitats. So there isn't a really clear pattern across geographical scales for colonial spiders. So for colonial spiders, rather than being associated with particular biomes like social and subsocial species, the evidence so far suggests that spatial patterns may occur at the microhabitat level. So their occurrence in certain areas is mostly predicted by how much prey, the abundance of prey each habitat has. So they can inhabit a range of biomes as long as there is enough prey for them to take advantage of. Okay, so why do spiders form groups? In the spiders, as well as many other animals, but let's talk, I'm just gonna focus here on the spiders because they're very different in this way. We must consider three different factors when we address why some species form social groups and why other species do not. So one factor that is very important is the set of environmental conditions, the challenges and opportunities the environment provides that group living and cooperation will allow particular species to meet. So once we consider the set of environmental challenges and opportunities, we need to consider also the life history and other intrinsic features of the species that are relevant to those environmental challenges and opportunities. In this case, we're gonna be focusing a lot on the web type that the spiders are gonna build. Also, evolutionary history is important because the evolutionary history of the species determines whether particular species can be molded into social lifestyles or not. So the interplay between the environment and intrinsic features of the individuals should explain why social and non-social species in a given taxa occupy different environments, and why within particular habitats, closely related species may differ in their social systems. On the other hand, evolutionary history and phylogeny should determine which taxa has the appropriate characteristics to be molded into social and cooperative lifestyles. So these three factors together should explain the diversity of social systems in the spiders, as well as their geographical distribution. So let's talk about the intrinsic features of the organisms that allow or facilitate evolution of group living. So one intrinsic trait of the spiders that appears to have played key roles in the kind of social system a species is going to develop is the architecture of the webs spiders build. And I already talked about this a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, irregular webs can be built and occupied simultaneously by multiple individuals. Therefore, species that build these irregular webs that can potentially be shared with other spiders are able to develop social systems that involve cooperation in web building, cooperation in foraging, brood care, cooperation in brood care. So they can evolve social systems like the non-territorial social or subsocial species. However, one thing to note is that, as I mentioned, even species with irregular webs may sometimes maintain individual territories depending on the environmental conditions. So there's always exceptions to the rule. On the other hand, as we already discussed, species that build orbicular webs are limited to aggregations of individual territories, consistent of individual webs, like the example here. So they would most likely evolve to have colonial lifestyles. They would be like the colonial species that we talked about. These species would be required to maintain separate territories because our webs are designed to be built and used by a single spider. So as a side note, one point that I like to make here that is very important is that there are differences in how costly these two types of webs are to the spiders. Orbicular webs, on the one hand, are less costly to build and maintain. So these type of webs, they can be relocated, they can be ephemeral, they can be rebuilt, they can be, if they get destroyed, they can be rebuilt over and over. So they're less costly. On the other hand, irregular webs are most costly to build. So they tend to be more sedentary. And this is going to be key when explaining why groups form and why the spiders stay in the nest instead of dispersing, especially in habitats where conditions are adverse and the nests get destroyed and you need to build new webs constantly. So because irregular webs are costly to maintain and to produce, this is going to play a key role in the evolution of group living and cooperation in social spiders. So these type of webs, as I said before, and how costly they are to build in interaction with particular environmental conditions would then determine the fitness of individuals in the group as a function of group size. And therefore, it will determine whether groups can form, whether these groups are able to form in certain places, but not in others, and the range of group sizes that different species develop. So, but what do I mean by that? What do I mean by they're gonna influence the fitness of individuals as a function of colony size? Okay, I wanna look briefly at these fitness curves, and then I wanna go back to the three social systems again and explain how the interaction of the web type and environment explains each social system. So, to explain why organisms live in groups in general, we must consider two things, both the benefits as well as the costs of living in groups, right? You probably already are familiar with that. And how these costs and benefits of living in groups is going to affect fitness of individuals in relation to group size. On the one hand, the benefits of forming groups is going to cause fitness to increase as group sizes increases, right? However, when group sizes increases, there are also costs associated with living in groups, as you already know. For instance, in spiders, some of these costs is increased competition for resources, as well as increased parasite load, and so on. So this cost is going to cause some components of fitness to decrease as the size of the group increases. So the result is that this will cause the average fitness to peak at intermediate colony sizes. So this hypothesis has been formally tested in social spiders and colonial spiders. This figure here shows intrinsic benefits of group living in three social species: Anelosimos eximius in Ecuador, Stegotyphus dumicola in Namibia, and Aebutina vinotata in Ecuador. And this figure is straight from your book. So this figure shows intrinsic benefits of group living, and for all these species, fitness of individuals is greatest at the intermediate colony sizes. As you can see here, there's a hand shape function, and fitness peaks at intermediate colony sizes. For the two curves on the top corresponding to Anelosimos eximius and Stegotyphus dumicola, A and B, which corresponds to female lifetime reproductive success, we can see that females living alone or in small groups here are not able to replace themselves in the respective habitats, as shown by having fitness lower than 1. So this suggests that group living is a necessity in these environments where these social species are living. We don't show here data on subsocial species, but there is data from subsocial species which suggests that offspring may benefit from the protection offered by the natal nest and by the mother. However, as they grow, as the offspring grow in the group, their energetic demands, their needs are also graded, and also competition within groups is graded, which may cause fitness to be either flat, so not a curve, either flat or a decreasing function of the number of individuals in the group, which obviously shifts the balance that will favor dispersal. And that's why they disperse at some point in their life cycle. So now that you can see that fitness is achieved, greatest fitness achieved at intermediate colony sizes, and species will disperse after that. So there is a cost and benefit of living in group. I want to elaborate on how some of the benefits of group living that are relevant to spiders, including benefits in food acquisition, predator avoidance, and offspring care, how this may shape the fitness of social, subsocial, and colonial spiders. As I have already mentioned, one point that has been made in the literature is that the relative importance of these components of fitness in explaining spider sociality likely depends on the architecture and associated costs of their webs. So this is something that is going to come up over and over again for explaining the evolution of social systems in spiders. So one of the benefits of group living in spiders is the protection that the nest confers against predation, against environmental conditions. Many of the social species live in environments such as the lower tropical rainforest, where there is increased predation by ants, or nests get destroyed frequently by heavy rains. So living in this nest offers that initial benefit. For subsocial and social spiders and their presumably costly irregular webs, for them, the most immediate benefit of group living that may have been an initial driver or may have initially selected for the offspring to remain in the maternal nest may have been, the literature says that may have been the protection conferred by this permanent tridimensional nest and also sharing the costs of its maintenance. In social spiders, actually, the per capita cost of making the web declines with colony size. So it's beneficial to share this cost by living together and building the nest together, especially in environments where the nest is getting destroyed frequently, and you can't you cannot afford to replace the nest as often. So this initial benefit of saving in the amount of resources per capita needed to maintain this relatively expensive nest would have been then reinforced by additional benefits arising from avoiding costs of dispersal in these adverse habitats, where the probability of death while dispersing is pretty high, and also benefits of having additional caregivers, additional females to care for the young in case the mother die, which in these habitats, the probability of maternal death are also pretty high. So this is protection against predation and the environment conferred by the costly nests is thought to be one of the main driving forces of group living in social spiders. For the orb-weaving colonial spiders with their presumably relatively inexpensive webs that can be easily relocated from one place to another, so they're more ephemeral in one sense. In contrast, protection conferred by the nest is not a primary driver. That probably came as a secondary benefit only. In contrast, as we're gonna see now, the primary driver of their social system and aggregations is probably accessing through their aggregation of the individual webs, open spaces where prey are abundant. So they have a foraging advantage and they have secondary benefits in predator avoidance or defense conferred by the nest. So let's talk about resource acquisition. One well-known benefit of social living in general is the ability of groups to access niches not available to solitary individuals. For orb-weaving colonial spiders in particular, this is a foraging benefit that may have been the primary advantage of forming colonies, the primary driver of this social system. Because by aggregating their individual webs, as I said before, they're able to access spaces that are prey rich, there is an abundance of prey, yet they're too vast for individuals to occupy. So they need to make a complex of webs interconnected with each other to be able to access these open spaces. And these are, for example, gaps in between trees or open spaces over creeks. I have seen in Ecuador in the rainforest, entire colonies on top of a creek. They cover a single web wouldn't be able to do that. So by connecting their individual webs to one another, they're able to access these open habitats and benefit from foraging efficiency. Even so, for colonial spiders, even in the absence of cooperative foraging, because they don't cooperatively capture prey, colonial or weaving spiders may benefit by catching insects that rebound from, they rebound off adjacent webs. So the insect would land on this web for an instance, and then will rebound to the next one, until it lands to a lucky web where it's finally captured. And this phenomenon is known as the ricochet effect. So this is one way that they benefit from an abundance of insect prey in forming colonies. Another well-known benefit of living in groups is the ability of groups to capture large prey that would be too large for solitary individuals to access. So spiders can capture prey magnitudes larger than their own body size. As you can see here, this is Anelosimos eximius in Ecuador. You can see here the spiders are capturing the large prey. So this is one well-known benefit, that they can access this ecological niche that is not accessible to solitary individuals, because capturing prey this big may be dangerous or too big for them. Here I want to show you a video. Here. Okay, so this is Anelosimos eximius in Ecuador. So they have already killed the prey here. This is not a bird. I know it looks like a bird, but it's actually a large moth, pretty heavy. A single spider wouldn't be able to capture this on their own. So the way they cooperate to capture the prey is they will start biting the spider at different angles, and they will start wrapping the prey with silk in different angles from the wings, the legs. And then once the prey is dead, they will carry together as a little army cooperating in this. They will carry together the prey into the nest basket. So it's really incredible to watch them doing that. Oh, okay, next. However, one thing that I want to mention is that the foraging advantage of accessing large prey for social spiders is likely secondary in this social system. And it's even less important in the subsocial ones. However, they benefit from this because they can access larger prey, but it's likely not the driving force of why the social systems formed, unlike the protection that the nest confers to the individual spiders. But however, one thing that is very interesting that we have found is that the presence of large insects, of abundant large insects in their habitat, is essential for social spiders colonies to form. This concept is known as the prey size hypothesis. And I'm going to elaborate right now on this because this is very important for understanding why social spiders are not present at higher elevations and higher latitudes, why their colonies are not forming in those habitats. Okay, and I'm gonna elaborate on a little bit on this to explain why insect size and abundance of insect size in their habitats, it's important, and not just a bunch of small insects. Why large insects are important. In social spiders, it is important to consider the scaling challenges of their three-dimensional nest in determining how beneficial it is to live in groups as a function of group size. Here, for the social tropical Anelosimos eximius, having an abundance, we have found that having an abundance of large insects in their habitats is necessary to address these scaling challenges of the nests, and I'm going to explain why right now. Okay, so this is a typical nest of Anelosimos eximius, the most social species that we know, which lives in the lowland tropical rainforest in South America. So you see the nest has the shape of a basket with the prey capture lines there and the surface area. So in Anelosimos eximius, as colonies grow in size, the surface area of the web, which intersects the insect prey, does not grow as fast as the volume of the nest. This volume of the nest is proportional to the number of spiders in the nest. So this volume grows, but not the prey capture area, okay? So as a result, the number of prey per capita here in the figure A declines with colony size. And this is a problem when you have large colonies, obviously. However, if large insects are available in the environment, the spiders can compensate for this decline by capturing increasingly large insects. And this is possible because the size of their webs, as well as the number of cooperating individuals, are going to increase as well. So they're able to subdue these large insects. So as a result, prey biomass per capita is maximized at intermediate colony sizes. Okay. So prey biomass per capita is maximized intermediate colony sizes, and the fact that this biomass per capita peaks at these intermediate colony sizes here would then explain why social spiders are better off living in groups, and why they tend to leave the colony when the colony gets too big, because after certain sizes, the prey biomass per capita decreases, so there's gonna be more intraspecific competition for food for the spiders. So this explains why. In studies actually in Stegodiphyus, which is the genus in Africa, studies in Stegodiphyus are consistent with this observation. It has been shown that larger colonies of Stegodiphyus do capture larger prey, but even though they were capturing larger prey, larger colonies contain smaller spiders, as the large prey available in the environment didn't keep up with the size of the colony. And this explains also here why this is decreasing. How come they don't continue to capture larger insects like they do here? We can see that they capture larger insects up to certain size and then evens off. And this is because even though the colony grows, the size of the insects in the environment don't grow forever. Insects have a limit to their total body size. So eventually, there's not going to be any larger insects available. So at that point, the prey biomass per capita is going to decline. And that happens also in Stegodiphyus. There's a limit to the size of the insects available in their environment. In subsocial species, which we don't show here, even though groups may have more food per capita than when they live alone, there is an increase within group competition, and usually the per capita food intake and survival in subsocial species may decline with colony size. So fitness in subsocial spiders is likely a flat or a declining function of the number of siblings in the group, which a finding that based on the prey size hypothesis, we attribute to the absence of large prey in the respective habitats. Remember that subsocial species inhabit higher elevations, higher latitudes, and we have demonstrated in our studies, we have sampled the size of the insects in these habitats, and we have found that insects are on average smaller at higher elevations, and they are on average larger in tropical places in the lowland tropical rainforest where social species occurs. And so, and this would explain why social spiders are concentrated at lower latitudes and elevations and where insects are large. Okay. Okay, so another benefit of group living, as I have mentioned before, it's offspring care, which is very important in spiders, especially social and subsocial spiders. As I have mentioned before, or again, I'm bringing up the irregular webs because irregular webs, characteristics of social and subsocial spiders, provide a common space for sharing and makes communal brood care possible, whereas care is limited to egg guarding and done individually by the colonial species. So there is substantial evidence right now that allomaternal care confers significant benefits to the survival of the offspring of social and subsocial spiders. For instance, one example in the subsocial Andelosimo arizona, the offspring, the size of the offspring, as well as the survival of the offspring, correlates positively with the lifespan of the mother. And as well as in Stegodiphyus, and species of Stegodiphyus, the young tend to disperse at a later stage when the mother lives longer. In social spiders and also in transitional subsocial social spiders where multiple females are present in the nest, the presence of surrogate caregivers, so the presence of other females that may help take care of the offspring, in the event of the mother's death is essential for the survival of the offspring. So there is the maternal death hypothesis that posits that surrogate caregivers, so other females in the nest, would allow the species to occupy environments where offspring development tends to be slower, as in the case of the social and subsocial spiders, but also where mortality of the mother is pretty high, such as in the lowland rainforest due to the heavy rains, or in desert habitats in Namibia, where there's high rates of predation by ants. Here, this is a little chunk of a spider colony of social Andelosimos, social Andelosimos eximius, and we can see the different egg sacs here spread in this leaf and the different females there. So in the highly social Andelosimos eximius in this picture here, it has been documented that females frequently, they tend to switch egg guarding in the low elevation rainforest. So they take turns. Here, their broods will mix with each other at very early instars. And this occurs significantly less in less social species inhabiting intermediate elevation, as is the case as Andelosimos guacamayos, another species of Andelosimos that are social, a little bit less social though, that are found at higher elevations. So in the colonial spiders, on the other hand, as the picture here, offspring care is an individual activity because we believe because of the restrictions of their individual webs, of the orb webs. So parental care is limited to egg guarding, and they tolerate the young within the aggregated webs, but there's no more parental care beyond that. Here, females guard their eggs within their individual webs, or sometimes these aggregations have common areas, common retreats where females guard their eggs, but always attached to their own bodies. When the offspring eclose, they are tolerated within this web complex. So they, individuals, the offspring may place their own orb webs in centrally located areas here where they are more protected from predation. So they do have somewhat some benefit of group living, but it's very limited, as we can see. And there are, of course, other benefits of living in groups in social spiders. But these here are the three most important ones that we believe have facilitated the evolution of group living in spiders. There is, for instance, in other social systems, the benefit of mating benefit. But this in spiders is unlikely to be a primary driver of group living in either social, subsocial, or colonial spiders. However, once groups have formed, despite the costs of inbreeding, males should benefit by finding mates among colony members rather than dispersing. This benefit would probably depend upon the number of potential mates in the nest relative to the distance to other nests, the risk of mortality if they disperse, the dispersal ability of the spiders, and any other benefits of group living that they may lose if they disperse. So they do have essentially some benefit to mating, finding mates within the colony. So there's various studies that have looked at social and subsocial anelosimos species and the benefits of staying within the nest for both males and females. And they show that likely these benefits far exceed potential costs of inbreeding depression. And this may have been the case when there was the transition from an outbred ancestor to an inbred system. And noting that this is probably applying to other spiders in other genera. So there are more benefits than cost of related to inbreeding depression here. In the case of colonial spiders, because they appear to be of mixed genetic origin, or the colonies are also have more gene flow than in social spiders, in this species, males can, they can take advantage of the concentration of females in their aggregations without paying the costs of inbreeding depression. So in both social and colonial spiders, males may enjoy a secondary mating benefit from aggregations or from living in groups. However, the extent of this benefit, genetic or otherwise, is still unknown. So I'm not gonna elaborate more about that. Okay, so let's talk about the role of ecology. Well, we've already been talking about that. So far, it might be already clear to you that together with the characteristics of the species themselves, we've been talking about the nest, ecology is essential for explaining why social groups are formed. So now I want to summarize the main ecological factors that we believe are responsible for the development of the different types of spider systems, social systems that we have seen so far, and to explain their geographical distribution. This figure here is also straight from your book. You can refer to that if you don't understand. I know it's a little confusing, but I'm gonna try my best to explain. Okay, so let's focus first on social and subsocial spiders. So for them, it is believed that the three main environmental factors that are relevant for explaining whether and where species with three-dimensional nests, and largely depending on maternal care for their survival, are able to live as single females or they need to form groups. So therefore, this would explain, these ecological factors would explain why social groups form in some habitats, but are absent from higher elevations and latitudes, and why subsocial spiders are absent from the lowland tropical rainforest. So these are rain intensity, predation, mostly by ants, and insect size. On the one hand, rain intensity and predation risk alone or in combination may explain why subsocial species are excluded from certain areas. In anelosimos and the neotropics, they would be, they're excluded from the lowland tropical rainforest because as we approach the lowland tropical rainforest, there is an increase in predation by ants and an increase in precipitation intensity. Precipitation intensity is key for considering how often these nests get destroyed and how often colonies go extinct in these habitats. And there is now evidence of predation by ants in these habitats. I have seen firsthand how entire colonies can disappear in matters of minutes when they are attacked by ants. So, so so on the one hand, rate intensity and predation risk explain why subsocial spiders are absent from these habitats. Whereas insect size, as we have seen why they're so important for social colonies, they predict whether why they're absent from higher elevations, higher latitudes, and why they're present in the lower tropical rainforest where insects tend to be larger. So predation risk, in particular by ants, seem to be a factor common to most species across social spider genera, including the African species. There's so many studies right now showing the effect that predation by ants has on social spider colonies in different habitats. Strong rains, on the other hand, they're only relevant to the social spiders occupying rainforest habitats. So this would exclude the African species. So for a species with costly webs and with offspring that heavily depends on maternal care for survivals, colonies that only have one single female and her offspring and that build really costly webs would not be able to cope and persist in these environments with rain intensity and predation by ants. So, this predation rates and the high probability of maternal care in these core habitats where social species are typically found requires group living to persist and cope with these conditions. So these factors exclude subsocial species from the lowland tropical rainforest. And this is shown, actually, there is evidence. This is shown by the fact that solitary females of social species living in these habitats, either of Anelosimos or Stegodiphyus, are not able to replace themselves when they're by themselves. For example, single females of Anelosimos eximius in the lowland tropical rainforest appears to have a 90% failure rate. So in these habitats, to be able to persist, you need to live in groups. It's a necessity to live in groups. And that's why subsocial species are absent from these habitats. So permanent social species, on the other hand, with their large three-dimensional nest, can cope easily with these conditions and are able to persist in these habitats as a group. However, they would only be able to persist in these habitats if there is enough large prey to sustain their three-dimensional webs, their large colonies. For social spiders, absence of large prey, the absence of large insects is the most significant impediment for the formation of large colonies at high latitudes and elevations. As we already saw, I explained to you why insect size is so important for compensating for the scaling challenges of these three-dimensional webs. And we have found that as we go away from the low elevation tropical rainforest, we go up in elevation, insect size decreases, as well as at higher latitudes. Okay, let's talk about colonial spiders. For the orb-weaving colonial spiders, on the other hand, with webs that are presumably less costly, as we already saw, they also have larger clutch sizes, and they have little reliance on maternal care. Colonial spiders would be able to live either solitarily or in colonies in the same environment. So for them, the story is a little bit different. As I said before, however, factors at the microhabitat level appear to be key for their occurrence, namely the presence of open spaces and high prey abundance. Actually, what's interesting in colonial spiders, there's one species, Philoponella republicana in South America. The species and the colony, they adjust the spacing. They adjust the spacing within the colony complex based on the abundance of insects in their habitat. So, in conclusion, coloniality and orb weaving spiders would be a strategy to access areas of high prey density that because of insufficient web attachment points are inaccessible to solitary spiders. And this, as we can see here, increasing insect abundance, there's coloniality is more common. Okay, we're almost done. So I want to touch briefly on how social spiders relate to other social organisms, or rather how they differ. So social spiders have at least 3 characteristics that make them very different than most social organisms that you have seen so far in this course. First of all, social spider colonies aren't just social groups. They are also self-sustaining populations that grow through internal recruitment over multiple generations. So they are also highly inbred, and they exhibit highly female biased sex ratios, as we already talked about initially. So only 2 other arthropod systems exhibit similar combination of features that we know of, and these are the spider mites and the saucids. This is an example of a spider mite colony, and this is an example of a colony of saucids here. I don't have better picture of those, unfortunately. So in both of these cases, the colonies share a dense web built in cooperation with nest members. And these webs, which you can see as a dense webbing, has an anti-predatory function, just like the spiders. They do confer protection to the individuals, and just like the spiders, there aren't any reproductive castes, and individuals actually stay in the nest their entire lives, just like the spiders. And just like the spiders, all activities take place within the nest. However, there are also other systems that exhibit some sort of association between sociality, inbreeding, and biased sex ratios, with some differences from the social spiders. For example, we have 2 species of parasitic ants. They have intranest mating. We also have the Australian gall-inducing thrips and also ambrosia beetles. They have some similarities to social spiders. In all of these 3 cases that I just mentioned, colonies are initiated by females who have been inseminated by nestmates before they disperse. And so this will produce female biased offspring in these cases. However, unlike the social spiders, rather than being self-sustaining populations, in these 3 cases, these are family groups that dissolve once the offspring has completed development. Also, in the eusocial thrips, they exhibit, in fact, reproduction, division of labor. So in case of vertebrate systems that exhibit those combinations of features, I don't think there's any. The naked mole rats are also highly inbred, but they aren't self-sustaining populations, but rather they are extended family groups where the fountain female is the only one that reproduces. In social spiders, all females reproduce. So they aren't female based in their sex ratio, the naked mole rats. The social system of colonial spiders, on the other hand, resembles the system of colonial birds or also colonies of prairie dogs, where single individuals or basic family units aggregate to take advantage of either information sharing opportunities or predator protection. Colonial spiders appear to aggregate to take advantage of locally abundant resources and also benefit from predator protection, just like colonial birds. And I think this is all that I have for now. But I actually, before I go, I want to touch on something that I know I know you've been wondering. So I want to touch about the issue about the inbreeding characteristics of social spiders. I didn't include a slide, but I should have. But so I want to touch a little bit on that. I know you're wondering about the consequences of having these highly inbred social systems. The consequences both in the short as well as the long term. So it has been argued that these high levels of inbreeding are the result rather than the cause of this social system. So they are inbred because of their social system. They're not causing their social system. So, so the reason for the origin of these highly inbred social spider systems are of great interest, including their short and long-term consequences, but we don't really know much about this. On the one hand, it appears that the benefits of living in groups are far greater than the costs of inbreeding depression for both males and females. However, I have to mention that it has been argued that the highly inbred social spiders would actually represent an evolutionary dead end. This is due to the low genetic variability of individuals, of the colonies, and of the entire populations. So as a result, social spiders may be more susceptible to disease, to parasites, and probably less able to respond to changing environmental conditions compared to their outbred relatives like the subsocial or their solitary relatives. As a consequence, these social spiders may be species that are short-lived and they are unable to actually speciate, right? Which is consistent with the fact that the vast majority of inbred social spiders represent isolated tips on the phylogenetic tree of the spiders. So there's a paper that was published about that, and it's very interesting. And that's what they call them. They call them evolutionary dead ends, and that would be one of the long-term consequences of being highly inbred. So even though they have, it's beneficial to live in groups, highly inbred groups in ecological time, over the long term, these benefits are not so great anymore if you are an evolutionary dead end. So I want to finish my presentation here. And thank you for paying attention. And I really hope that I provided some information that made you fall in love with the social spiders. They are truly a unique system to study. And I've been really happy to share some of the knowledge that I have about them. So thank you.